Hello, everybody, and welcome to Behind the Pixel, an interview show where I talk to different people in the video game industry about their origin stories and what they do to shape the world of video games for us. I am your host, Max Roberts, and with me this time is Danny O'Dwyer from NoClip.
Hey, what's up, Max? How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Great. Thank you so much for having me on. Absolute pleasure to talk about myself.
Talk about yourself and your company.
Yeah, hopefully talk about video games, which is kind of what we do, I guess. We let other people tell their stories. I think that's probably the focus of NoClip.
This, if you think about it, this is like a weird audio-only mini-doc about making documentaries.
It's so meta. It's amazing.
Maybe that should be the title of them. I don't know how that would work in SEO, but meta doc or something.
Screw SEO, man. Just get a bunch of people to fund your work privately, and then you don't have to worry about anyone watching your videos.
Maybe that's what I should try and do.
It helps once you've worked at a major site for 5 years. I'll definitely say that.
Darn it. Okay. So you kind of just alluded to it a little. You worked at GameSpot for 5 years. Was that just GameSpot US or UK as well? You did both.
Mixture of the two. Yeah, okay. Mixture of the two. It was a weird, and it's really weird talking about it now because I actually, in my mind and in reality as well, I guess, I actually spent longer trying to break into the industry than I actually ever did in the industry. I was a huge GameSpot fan growing up. Massive fan of like Jeff Gerstmann and Vinny Caravella and all these folks who would eventually leave and found the website Giant Bomb. But I used to watch them in Ireland, on the worst possible time zone to watch a live show on a Thursday. It was like midnight when their weekly show went up. And I'd sit in the chat room and think this is amazing. And I kind of like worked as a web developer, but in the back of my head I always wanted to see about the game thing. And I mean, there was no pipeline. There still is no pipeline really for getting into the industry. But back then it was kind of like, all right, I'll just practice all the stuff that they do. So I tried to write some, and I tried to, learn how to edit video and try to figure out ways of talking about games in ways that other people found interesting. It eventually actually made me move to London because I had an interview at GameSpot and didn't get it. When I was living in Ireland, they flew me over for an interview and hired someone else. And so I said, oh, screw it. Maybe it was because I lived in Ireland. Maybe that's why they didn't hire me. So I moved to London, the main goal of trying to get employed there. And 2 years later, I was actually leaving London. I had thrown in the towel. I worked on my own website, and they still didn't seem interested, and I didn't get any more interviews. So I decided to leave. And then a couple of weeks before I was leaving to move to the Middle East, I got an email from CBS saying, yo, we have a job for you. So I was finally in at GameSpot UK.
That's perfect timing, it sounds like.
It makes the choice real. It's like, all right, do you want to follow this crazy dream you've had, or do you want to, move continent? And at the time, I was also in a relationship, so that kind of came to an end. So, well, a little bit later, based on that, and I think it ultimately has been the main compass for the rest of my life since. And I'm incredibly grateful to Ben Howard and Chris Bowman for taking a risk on me, because 2.5 years later, I was basically the face of the US site, which was my dream manifest. So I'm very, very privileged. And
you started your own site. It was Citizen Game.
Yeah, how about that for a name?
Well, I liked your logo because the E went in both of it. I thought that was kind of creative.
I designed that. Thank you.
And on Citizen Game, at least I found the earliest examples of you making a documentary in your very first episode, where you went over to Hello Games when they were making Joe Danger 1, and you talked to Sean Murray, which actually makes a lot more sense when you did your No Man's Sky doc later at GameSpot. Yeah. But your very first episode had a mini documentary of making Joe Danger 1 on the PS3. Was that where the desire to create documentaries kicked in, or you just thought, this will be cool, I should put this in the first episode?
Yeah, it's really weird to hear you say it, actually, because I actually hadn't considered that at all. I mean, I think what I was frustrated about about games coverage was that there was stuff that they did and there was stuff that they didn't do, and they didn't do this type of stuff because it didn't seem to get traffic, but I just thought they were doing a really bad job of it. So previews was basically that, right? Mm-hmm. preview coverage on game sites was awful forever, and it wasn't because people weren't interested in games before they came out, which was the sort of the main thought in the press. It was because they just sucked at putting previews, video previews anyway. They didn't know how to interview people, they didn't know the right questions to ask, and how to personalize people. So that's why in the industry at that time you just had this like weird, everyone was media trained and gave the same answers. So when we went to do that, it was just like, okay, we're putting together this show, right? This like really antiquated idea of like a 30-minute like monthly show. This is kind of like as YouTube is kicking off, so I'm not really sure.
I noticed you had to like upload them in 10-minute chunks because I think that was before YouTube let unlimited like length uploads.
It totally was. I forgot about that. You're right. Yeah. It
was like a 5-part video. Right. Like your interview cuts off at the very beginning of it. It's like you gotta go find the next one.
It was also so badly color corrected because we did it on a Canon XL1 and I had the white balance all set wrong. It was we went out there. It's really strange to talk about it now because like myself and Timur Hussein, who is now the editor of GameSpot UK, who I met on the GameSpot forums and who ended up getting a job in the industry through partly us working together at Citizen Game. He was my neighbor. I moved to London and we realized we were one tube stop away from each other. So it's really weird to talk about this in retrospect because we were basically two guys who were dreaming about working in the industry for 5 years, and now here we are. But yeah, we went out there just to do an interview, and then I thought, I'll just do it in a different way and just make it about them and not necessarily the game. But yeah, it's really strange to think. Sean is actually from my home county in Ireland. We met at the Eurogamer Expo because he recognized my accent and ran after me. And then that's how that all came about. And it wasn't, I mean, years later then that landed me one of the biggest exclusives in the industry at the time with our No Man's Sky stuff. And that's a story that I definitely hope that we can follow up on at some stage.
I would love if you or someone could follow up on that game because I think that's so interesting. The way that No Man's Sky came out and its reception and just even like when his Twitter account was hacked, like all that stuff is so interesting. And how I'm curious how they feel. Like that's what I want to know is it's so interesting, and they keep patching the game, and it's
they're adding like so much stuff to it, obviously in a way to try and clear the name. I think it's a fascinating look into. Like, I'm very interested, as I'm sure you are, dealing by your work in sort of how the media assimilates information and how the public does. And I think that whole PR cycle for that, like even Shuhei basically throwing him under the bus, Sony sort of saying, oh, well, they didn't have the right PR people, all this sort of stuff was, and like that whole time for those years, when I was working at GameSpot, we had recorded 3 separate things with them throughout the year that hadn't never been seen because we were going to put together like this is like the year of making No Man's Sky. Mm-hmm. And in the end, I just didn't put it out because I thought the last thing they need is more eyes on this. And
it got so hyped. I've never seen a game hyped to that level.
Yeah,
it was
ridiculous. It was, and like some of it was them, and some of it was just like people wanting to believe in. Like to anyone who knew anything about games, like you knew what that game was before it came out. You didn't necessarily know how it controlled or like how much variety there was, but the idea that folks had in their head about what that game was, and I guess Sean's like desire to create this air of mystery around it so that anything could be possible in the same way that he and his team had about games like Elite. I think they were trying to go for that. They weren't necessarily trying to dupe people. But yeah, I don't think folks responded to it very well when reality sat in.
No, I don't. I did buy into the hype and got the game, and it just got too repetitive for me. And I don't play like Minecraft or other games like that, so it didn't really hook me in. And I'm sure it's a great game. It's beautiful, I think, and I think the concept's super cool. I just think I bought into the media hype of it, and that obviously led to me being disappointed. But I'm not mad at Sean or anyone at Hello Games. They put their heart into it. It sounds like he seems very genuine.
He's a lovely guy. I think that was maybe the worst part of that whole thing was seeing folks think that he was being intentional about all that stuff, knowing the character of the guy. But hey, you got to learn lessons, and that I think that was a big one for them, and maybe for Sony as well. Maybe
just a little
pop
bit
up an indie, and maybe don't charge full price for a game that ultimately was probably not being designed to be a full price game.
Lessons learned. And so then the next example I think I found of you doing a documentary was your Escape from Mount Stupid, which maybe there's a story behind that name, but you did one on Sensible Software. There might have been one in between there, but Sensible Software was the next kind of documentary I found from you. And then a month later, you did the one on video games and depression.
Yeah.
Both of those were years away from when you did the Citizen Game one, but what was the approach to those two specifically? I know Sensible Software was your favorite developer growing up, and then the depression one was one you related to. So, but what was the design behind those in the pursuit?
I think, EFMS, that show, I did not title that show.
Okay.
It was called Bluffer's Guide previously, and then we got a cease and desist from a publisher in South London who owned the rights to Bluffer's Guide. They had made books, something. So my boss actually renamed the show. I think it's a terrible title, but I couldn't come up with a better one, so that's what we ended up with. But yeah, I mean, the Sensi one was because I wanted to talk to John Hare. Like, I wanted an excuse to talk to the one of the people behind my favorite games ever, like Sensible Soccer and Cannon Fodder and Whizball. So that was sort of the reason behind that, and also like I didn't have enough information. Like you can scrape Wikipedia for lots of games, but when you're talking about a relatively, I wouldn't say obscure, but outside of UK, certainly Sensi are quite obscure. You don't have all that information about him, so that was just one of the situations where I took a punt and I reached out to John, and he was up for it, and we had a long interview. I got him in for a live stream at one stage as well, and we also got really drunk that night, I remember, and hung out at a bar for like 3 or 4 hours, and he worked the next day. He was like a lecturer, so I felt pretty bad. Drank him under the table as well. And so that was why that happened. And then the video game versus depression one was when you're working at a game site, you kind of, there's this tendency to make sure that you sort of you do your dues, like you get your numbers, you do the show, you work as hard as everyone else on the team, and then if you have a bit of extra time, then you can work on something yourself. And that's what that was. And it was kind of a way for me to get used to using cameras again, because at GameSpot you tended to have video, like folks who were kind of shooting, and then you had folks who were in front of camera. And I was kind of the first person that they had taken on who was doing both. I guess Johnny Chiodini was doing it as well, but Chris had built a team of people who were kind of autonomous. And one of the things that I felt that I lost track of a bit was my use of camera. So this was a really good excuse to get out, shoot my own interviews, and then edit them and try and make something cool. And obviously the topic was something that was important to me as well, and I felt like it was something that was more people within the space of games were talking about a little bit more, but also not enough. So it felt like a good opportunity, and because it was existing outside of my normal day-to-day work, then I didn't have a time constraint on it like I would have other things. So it sort of like was something that I stewed on and worked on from time to time over the course of a couple of weeks. So I got used to that sort of workflow, which is way more important with long-form documentary stuff, because you can't sort of skip it. Or if you do, it just comes across, you lose so much of what it could be. So yeah, the video games versus depression thing was probably the most significant like bit of training, I guess I could say I did in the UK.
And then when you moved over to the US for GameSpot, just the US site version of it, in your Patreon video for NoClip, you mentioned 3 documentaries specifically: The Witcher 3, No Man's Sky, which we talked about before, and then Overwatch. And those kind of lead into NoClip, I think. But the Witcher one, they were all 3 parts. The Witcher first part was how games were made, and I thought that was very much like NoClip, and then the other 2 felt more like game previews. Right. Like showing the gameplay in the world and like typical preview stuff. But your first part was how games were brought into the country. And then No Man's Sky did a similar thing. And then Overwatch, I thought, was the most like what you do now at NoClip, where it was the story of Titan. It was the story of how they made Overwatch, and then, the reception of it. I thought, so how did those 3 shape your documentary pursuit skills?
I guess what happened there was I wanted to do more of the long form stuff, and Giancarlo Veronini, who was working at GameSpot for years, one of the best people I've ever worked under. Actually, I'd never technically worked under him, but I tried to work with him as much as I could. He's now over at Ubisoft running their Ubi blog. G was basically had this idea of creating some sort of equivalence to what Game Informer has for its front page, or I guess what IGN now does with IGN First, which is having that like sort of big, tentpole content drop about a game. So he came up with this thing called the Next Big Game, and the Next Big Game we ran, I think maybe 3 or 4 of them prior to most of them. I think No Man's Sky was the last one maybe, but we did one. I did one on Titanfall 2. I did one on XCOM, and I did one on something else. I forget what the other one was. And they were basically, they were previews, but they were asking to like do previews in a sort of a more interesting way. Or I guess I was saying I would do it in a more interesting way, which brings it back to the No Man's Sky thing, where it's like there are ways of covering these games that are a bit more interesting. So we went to preview events and we talked to people and we shot them in a different way, and we certainly edited them in a different way. But if you watch them now, they are pretty straight. What happened, I guess, over the course of those 3 was the No Man's Sky one was always going to be about them by virtue of the fact that we weren't getting much gameplay for that game anyway. So making it about Elite and making it about all these other things kind of was a natural fit. The Witcher one was basically us getting access to the game before anyone else. So although I could tell my little story about socialist Poland in the first episode, which is definitely my favorite one of the lot. We had so much fun shooting that.
I would agree. That was super interesting.
Like we were kind of telling that story as an aside when we were getting there. We were asking them questions basically to like flesh out our understanding of it. And I have Polish friends who grew up in communism, with their food stamps and all that stuff. In Ireland, there's quite a lot of Polish people who used to live in Ireland when I was living there. And so I had a decent understanding of some of it, but how it related to the games industry was like, I wasn't expecting that. The fact that like they used to beam, radio transmissions of old, Commodore 64 games over the airways is a little bit nuts.
Could you imagine that today with like our 50 and 60 gigabyte games, just waves of them?
Be tuning into a number station for like 2 years to download something.
Crazy.
So what we did was we had that one episode which like built anticipation for the other 2, and then exactly like right now they're not as evergreen, right? But at the time we were the first ones to show like uninterrupted gameplay of you like riding around on a horse and killing things. So that's why it's I don't know, people in games, media, and video often just care about numbers, and that's cool, and you could just put up gameplay clips if you want and do a preview, but there's like less care about the craft. And like I can only speak from the people I've worked with. I was very lucky to work with Andy Bauman and some other people at GameSpot who had the same sort of vision that I had about like what we should be doing with this access. Because it is like a privilege to have this access, right? So like anyone could just put up the preview clips, but what if you like turn it into something that's like more than the sum of its parts? So that was kind of the idea behind those. And then the Overwatch thing, like you talk about a lot of this stuff as being, or like in retrospect it does sound a little bit intentional, like here are the stepping stones, but like at the time it's just like, oh, we've got like 2 weeks to do this thing. Let's just see, what we can do with the assets we get. And so Overwatch is like, okay, this game isn't out. Nobody's really playing it yet. It's in like closed beta, so nobody really cares about the game specifically. So let's turn the story into, let's go down there and see if we can talk about Titan and if they'll open up about it. And I opened up with like a little bit, like the story of what Titan was, and especially the like internal politics of Blizzard at that time, and some of the people who got pushed out and some of the people who ended up winning, like Metzen. Like we didn't touch any of that because nobody was going to talk about that, but we got something about it, something a little bit more than what Overwatch is, and that was what was interesting, I think.
I thought it was too. I played a little bit of Overwatch when it came out, and I think the game itself is cool and the community around it, but I never knew the history behind it, and it sounded like there were dark times there for making this game. It was crazy. And now it just made over $1 billion, I think they just reported not long ago. Like the game,
I know it's so much different, right? Like, and then you think about that interview series, and it's like like back then they didn't know how good it was going to be at all. They probably thought we were onto something, but they didn't really know all that much. And a little bit of a production story about that, which was a little bit weird, was that I had about 5 weeks to make that. We shot it really early, and we were like, oh, there's going to be open beta. Like I think it was the start of May or April the next month. So I got like 5 weeks to put this together, no problem. So then I basically get like a little birdie tells me that IGN also went down and that they were putting something up in 2 weeks.
Oh.
And I had just gotten my wisdom teeth out.
Oh no.
Two of them. So when I found out, my mouth was all gauzed up and I wasn't able to speak. And I had I didn't actually have I think I had maybe 7 days to do it. I think to get out ahead of them, I would have had to have done it in 7 days. So I basically worked like 12-hour shifts in the GameSpot office, and that's why there's hardly any voiceover in those 3 videos. Because I was like drinking milk and like bleeding in the voice work booth trying to get the VO down.
When I had my wisdom teeth out, is the worst pain I'd ever felt. I wasn't able to take the medicine in time, so I woke up and I could feel it all. It was, my mom tried to feed me like mashed potatoes from Boston Market, but she didn't stop to feed me, so she was driving.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I was out of it, so I couldn't eat it. So when I got home, I felt the pain. It was awful.
So bad. That's part of the reason I actually ended up not getting knocked out for it. So I was awake for the 2 of them.
I couldn't do that.
But it just means that you can get the painkillers in you right away. So
That's
just
true.
in case.
Yeah,
I hated the painkillers. They gave me oxycodone. It's like,
yeah, that's what they gave me.
It's ridiculous. It's like you feel like you can't feel emotions for like 4 days.
My mom and my girlfriend at the time and now fiance, I was saying also. Oh, thank you. She was saying all sorts of stuff. I was all over the place. But I do remember that day I also got an email from Nintendo, like they're just blasts, and it was like, here's the special demo for Super Smash Bros. On 3DS, and Smash Bros. Is like one of my favorite franchises of all time, so that helped me feel, it made me feel a little bit better.
Nice work.
So, you've kind of had this trail of documentaries, whether it was intentional or not, leading to NoClip. So why did the dream job, which was to work at GameSpot and be the face of the site, like you said before, why did it become NoClip? Where was the switch in the dream?
I guess, to clarify that, I guess, maybe sometimes I feel like, especially now because I've got confidence, I think sometimes I can come across a little bit arrogant. I didn't necessarily want to be the face. I wanted to make GameSpot I wanted people to think about GameSpot the way I thought of GameSpot when I was a teenager. Mm-hmm. and it kind of sounds mean-spirited to say it now because I don't work there anymore, but I was saying it at the time as well. The GameSpot hadn't been like that in a long time. Like, people had fallen out of love with it. A lot of their favorite people had gone away, obviously. Jeff and Ryan and Vinny and everyone had gone to find Giant Bomb. And they had gotten some really cool people in there. Like, I was really lucky to work with people like Sean McInnes and Chris Waters, who were amazingly talented people, and they had a strong video team too. But the spark wasn't there anymore, and what I wanted to do was kind of join up and be part of that spark. And what happened when I definitely felt like I had that in the UK. I think I worked with some of probably the best people I've ever worked with in my entire life in the UK, with Johnny Chiodini and Seb Ford and Cameron Robinson and Sarah Lynch, all these amazing people. But when I got to the US, it was like a different sort of vibe. I mean, like right after I joined, they fired basically the entire video team. There was a whole structural change on the video department, and they also hired a bunch of people as well. And I guess after, like, I was lucky that I got to work on my own little bubble, and I got to, create shows like The Lobby and do The Point and all these other little things that were fun for me. But, like, at a certain stage, I felt like, look, I'm the fucking one who knows how to turn this site around. That's what I thought in my head. Whether or not that was right or wrong, I was like, nobody knows this site more than me. Nobody knows, like, the history and what the audience desires, and like I know where we're like falling flat, and I know where we're putting in too much effort, and it's giving us nothing, at least in terms of video. I didn't know anything about the editorial side, and actually the editorial side of the site was doing really well. The video side was sort of on, in my opinion anyway, it was on this pretty steady downward curve. And like really the reason I ended up leaving properly was that there was no room for me to move up. There was video management which I didn't really agree with on much at all. Um, who I also think were probably sick of having me pipe up about stuff the whole time. And it created a dynamic where my opinion, instead of I thought being valuable and, my ability to work with other people and maybe rally them a little bit as well, which is something that management I think wanted me to do more of, was I wanted to do in one direction, and I think the site was being pulled in another. So at a certain stage, I realized, look, the ultimate dream, I think at that stage, was to run GameSpot's video department. And at a certain stage, it looked like it might be possible, and then it wasn't possible enough for me. So then I left. So it was kind of like, look, either I get to like stay here and do what I think is like a much required fixing job of the video output on this website. Either you agree with me that that's a massive problem and I'll fix it, or I'll do my best to try and fix it, or you don't agree with me that there is a problem and then I'm walking out the door. And that's basically what that was. So NoClip was just kind of like, I mean, there's a thing that exists on GameSpot now called GameSpot Studios, which looks a little bit like NoClip. That's not a coincidence. I had ideas for what we should do on that site, but ultimately I decided then to I don't know. I figured if I got a little bit of money, I'd be able to figure out a way of producing stuff that was to a high standard. So I just took the jump, I guess. I was like, look, worst comes to worst, if this whole thing doesn't work out, I can crawl back to GameSpot, knock on the door, pray forgiveness, and get my job back, maybe. Or I could work somewhere else, or, do something else. I don't know. But I thought, hey, fuck it. Let's, there's only a certain amount of times you get to take big risks, especially with your job. So it was worth a punt.
Yeah. I think it certainly did pan out then, because have launched a pretty successful Patreon. I checked it today. You're at like 488,000.
Right. I try not to check as much. I used to check every day.
Oh, I'm sorry, but so you've launched a pretty successful Patreon, and I think as we start to talk about NoClip and what it is and what it does, my first question is, why the name NoClip? Where'd you come up with that?
I get asked this question a lot, and it's quite telling of the generation of the person who's asking the question.
Okay.
So do you any concept for what that might mean?
If I had to take a guess at it, if it was film, you would cut it and put it together. And if this is long form documentaries, you're not clipping the film.
It does work in two separate ways. I'm terrible at naming things. That's why my old boss had to name my old show for me. In fact, The Point, which was my op-ed show on GameSpot, I also didn't name that. I couldn't come up with a name.
It's so hard coming up with a name.
It's so difficult.
Our website, Model Citizens Media, that took us months, and I came up with the name for a podcast, Model Citizens, and we just didn't think to slap media on the end of it and just have it be the title. It's so hard.
Our company is literally called NoClip Media as well, so you just stick media on the end.
It works.
So yeah, it does work in terms of a film thing, which is part of it. I would go for a run, 4 times a week, and for like about a month, I feel like my runs were okay. This time I'll come back with the name. And then one day I did. So NoClip is a old cheat from old id Software first-person shooters.
Okay.
So clipping in games, is when you got, objects clip against the, environments and they freak out and stuff.
Speedrunners use it all the time.
Yeah, exactly. So NoClip is basically like an old Doom cheat where you can go through walls. So you can go up and down and left and right. And NoClip also works in Quake. It's actually been in games like Fallout and a lot of the Bethesda engine games.
Okay.
So essentially, it is a game. It is a cheat about walking through walls. So the idea of NoClip is that we're going to there's like a clip element with the video, but that what we're going to do is we're going to walk into areas of game discussions that haven't been done before. Into developers' studios, into people's houses, and stuff like that. So yeah, and it's pretty hard to come up with a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 letter word. It's good for branding. Usually in the Bay Area, they just take out a couple of nouns. So I was pretty happy to come up with a name that was like, Uh, I liked the other thing behind it was I knew that a lot of people wouldn't know what it meant, and the stuff that we make isn't for everyone. I'm not trying to get millions of views on this. It's for people who really, really care about like specific stories about video games. It's not meant to be mass consumed. So the idea that the title of the company was something that either you knew about or you didn't, I kind of liked as well. Although I will be honest, when we did the Doom documentary, I was kind of scared that Bethesda were going to give out to us for using NoClip.
Actually, yeah, even in light of, they just had that Kickstarter game change their name because it had Prey in the title. So
exactly,
that was a legitimate fear, I suppose.
Yeah, actually, when I walked in the door, they said that one of the first things that somebody said was Hugo Martin came over and said, "I love the name of your company." I was like, okay, we're good.
It's okay. That's pretty interesting. It's like a Konami code just for first-person shooters.
Basically, yeah, it is.
That's pretty. I've never played those games, which is probably one of my video game sins. But
we've all got them.
I've been told you're still trying to finish Ocarina of Time.
Yeah,
which
my first Zelda game I've ever completed is now Breath of the Wild. So
well, don't worry, I just beat Ocarina of Time the first time last summer, much to the pressure of one of my friends. So I never.
Apparently, I have a long way to go. Apparently, I have a long way to go. I've only just done Zora's Domain.
Do it as fast or as slow as you want. It took me years. I would borrow it from friends or play it at people's houses. I would always get to or through the Deku Tree and then just stop. So it's a good game. It's important. It did some things.
Yeah, it feels like watching. I read The Forever War recently, and it basically felt like I was reading a book of references that people have used in film and sci-fi ever since. And I felt the same when I played Zelda, Ocarina of Time, that this is where they came up with X, which I've now played in every other game for 20 years.
Yep. I remember the first Zelda game I played was Wind Waker. And
oh, yeah. Same here, actually.
Wind Waker's my favorite. Breath of the Wild is technically a better game, but I don't know, there's a soft spot for sailing on the open sea.
Technically a better game?
I guess, yeah, a little bit. It's kind of important. It's pretty good. It fits with your Rediscovering Mystery series.
I know, that was beautiful. God, that lined up real good.
That timing. You got it. You lucked out with that one. But I remember in Wind Waker, the chest animation when you would open a chest, do-do-do-do-do. And then I played Ocarina of Time later. I was like, oh, this is from Wind Waker. And then I realized, oh, it's the other way around. So, NoClip the name comes from Doom and Quake and things like that. So, my next question is, when you were launching the company, did you have documentaries lined up? Like Rocket League and Doom were your first two, or did you launch this without having any story you had queued up ready to tell?
Yeah, we launched with nothing. Okay. Sorry, I say we a lot. I should probably say I. I like to talk about we a lot because Jeremy Jane, who produces the videos with me, is a massive part of our success. But yeah, NoClip launched with nothing because I left my job on the Friday, and legally you're not allowed to work. I have signed contracts with CBS that mean that I won't do other work while I'm with them. So though you can do some things, you can brainstorm concepts and come up with logos and stuff like that, but if I start to register companies or start to do genuine outreach, then I'm getting into weird legal grounds. So I'm a Puritan when it comes to that sort of stuff. So I basically did none of that stuff until I walked out the door on Friday, and then Saturday morning I guess we had to shoot the trailer and do all that sort of stuff and make sure that all looked good. And then pretty soon after, I guess we launched on that Monday, and then I started to put out feelers then because I had a trailer, because I could be here's a thing I'm working on. Would you like to be the first one to do it? So I didn't have anything set up, but in my mind's eye, my ideal plan was to do Rocket League first and do Doom second. I think we were lucky that both those companies were into what we were doing, and I'd been thinking about it so long that I think I pitched them in a pretty good way. The Rocket League stuff was easier to set up because they were a relatively small team and hadn't had big media stories about them yet. And also, I'd done an episode of The Point about why I mechanically thought it was the most interesting football, soccer game I'd ever played. So that was an easy one to like kind of set them up. And then when that happened, we essentially sent that one to Bethesda and went, look, your Doom game is rad. It might win some Game of the Year things. It might win more of them if you let us do a 3-part documentary on it. That's kind of the way I pitched it. And yeah, then they opened their doors and man, they opened their doors. Yeah, so we ended up getting a really fun story out of that one.
It was, and I imagine, because you grew up playing Quake and Doom and other things, as you said, across things. So how cool is it to go in and do Doom and see all the stuff in the lobby and all that? You kind of had unbridled access to like this history of Doom.
Yeah, it's a very strange experience to, I mean, just like it goes back to interviewing John Hare, where like you suddenly have access to the people to like wizards, right? To like people who made the games that, the most impactful art form of your life. You get to meet the artists. It's like not many people get to do that. Not many people get to meet like Bach or Michelangelo or, Tom Hardy. I don't know. like you don't, it's a very strange industry that like it's impactful and wide ranging enough, but these people have such little visibility that they are kind of accessible if you're in the right spot. And I'm not only do I like people in that respect, but also I'm really curious about them. So to walk in and see like all the stuff, that's amazing. But to sit down and like actually talk to Kevin Cloud for 40 minutes is like, that's crazy to me. Like, it's still really strange. And I mean, I eventually ended up going to Ireland and interviewing Romero himself, and like that's probably up there with like the craziest interviews I've ever had. But like even to interview people like Hugo, who like isn't Hugo Martin, the creative director for Doom over at id, he like isn't someone like famous or anything, but to have the opportunity to sit down and talk to somebody who's like that talented for that long is like a massive privilege. So that to me that's where I get goosebumps, is being able to like have these people's time and attention, and then with that comes like a very serious degree of responsibility that you then want to make sure that, not that you like want to make sure that you're setting them in a good light. Like I talk about like, if you might win more Game of the Year thing. We weren't going there to do like a puff piece on Doom. Mm-hmm. And I think when you see the end video, there is a positive arc to it, but we also get into some shit that they probably wouldn't have necessarily wanted us to get into. But there is a responsibility, I feel like, to give the core of that conversation over to the viewer in like the most authentic way possible. So that's kind of, I guess, the loop of our docs, is that we go have these amazing conversations and then try and figure out over weeks of how do we express this to the listener, to the viewer, without having them sit down and listen to the entire conversation.
Even though you do put up your extended interviews on YouTube as well.
We do.
In case people want to listen to the whole thing.
Yeah, not all of them, because some people are more nervous and some people aren't. It doesn't flow as well. Mm-hmm. So we don't restrict them because like they told us secrets. But I don't want to ever have a situation where people don't want to talk to us because they saw one of the extended cuts and it made somebody look a little bit nervous.
Yeah.
So we put up a bunch of them, but yeah, we're gonna put up more actually very soon, like a whole bunch of them.
Okay. And then, so we kind of talked about Doom and Rocket League, but why do you pursue the games that you've done so far? You've done Rocket League, Doom, Frog Fractions 1 and 2, The Witness, and Spelunky are the games. You've done the Rediscovering Mysteries doc, which is kind of just about a general topic in games, and then, like you said, the John Romero one. So why do you pursue those games so far, the first 6 months?
It's all about reading the audience. I think so imagine that like you are you're a musical artist, right? So you've only got one debut album. So you want that debut album to really like make a statement. And then your second album, you're vibing off the first album. You want people to sort of get that one, but you also want to be a little bit different, right? Then you've got the difficult third album, which is is it time to reinvent yourself all over again, or do you, hold the line and keep everyone happy? And that sort of idea, the idea that you can't separate the artist from the material chronologically, is kind of shows the ebb and flow of what we did. So Rocket League was a really easy fit for us, right? Because NoClip's this it's a grassroots thing. We're entirely funded by patrons. We don't take any advertising revenue whatsoever. We don't take any kickbacks. We pay for our hotels. We pay for our flights. We're the most indie fucking video game video series you could possibly think of, and we're successful. And then you look at Rocket League, which is an incredibly indie game, which is doing all its own thing and is self-published and is successful. It seemed like a really good marriage, I think, image-wise for us. And also, it was a game that I played over 100 hours of on PC and PlayStation 4. So in terms of research, I knew this game inside out and backwards. And I also was a massive Unreal Tournament 99 fan. And the fact that a lot of the folks who worked on Rocket League, it actually stemmed from Unreal Tournament 2004. I'd read a Gamma Sutra article about it a couple of months earlier and was like, oh, there's a story here. If any of these people still work there, there's a story here. So that's why we did that one. Doom is basically okay, we've set the framework for what these things are with Rocket League. Now we need to go for something big. We need to show that we're not just here to tell stories about small studios, because the thing with indie game documentary series, or whatever you want to call this, the sort of subgenre of enthusiast reporting, always ends up being about indie studios or or journalists. That they always end up interviewing those things because they're easy to get to, right? So I thought what would be really cool is if we actually interviewed one of the biggest games that came out this year, and we did it that same way, where we don't just do a puff piece preview. We actually ask them really specific questions about game design. So that was the idea with the Doom one. Was okay, we'll do that. The Romero stuff was I was home in Ireland and I'm a workaholic and I needed to turn my vacation home into a work job. And I thought, actually, a lot of people were asking you should interview John Romero. So that's kind of why we did that. And it allowed me to start a new sort of sub brand within NoClip about people, which we're going to expand into folks who work in various parts of the industry, as well as people who are streamers and YouTubers and things like that as well.
Like this show.
Right, exactly. Things that are outside, because at the moment we've talked a lot about to developers, right? Mm. So then the other thing we want to do is, okay, at that stage you're looking at the audience and you're thinking, okay, now we're doing a lot of the Doom one. You can see is a pretty, it's a retrospective on a big game. So let's pull this back a little bit. Let's not do another big game, because if we do that, we've kind of done 3 relatively successful rags to riches stories, right? All of these arcs were, oh, this game, maybe it won't do well. Oh, it did well. That was the arc for Rocket League and Doom, right? Yeah. So, and also people were asking that I be on camera more, which is something that I did not want to do a lot at the start. I wanted the stories to be about the developers and not about my opinion of the story. So Rediscovering Mystery was a really good way of basically having my cake and eat it, by having, not only we're going to talk about indie games now, we're also going to talk about a topic that is pertinent to game development, but isn't necessarily about a specific game, so it's not like a puff piece. And also then we get to sort of, broaden the scope of what NoClip is doing. I like the idea that after 6 months, we wouldn't just have 3 documentary games, we'd actually have 5 or 6. Yeah. So we got to do, a series on The Witness, or a video on The Witness, a video on Spelunky, and then we actually ended up breaking the Frog Fractions thing out into 2 ones. And it allowed us to broaden the scope of what NoClip is. I think that's why I picked that one, because there's not very many times you're able to do a 50-minute documentary on a Flash game, and then also on a game that didn't necessarily sell very well, with Frog Fractions 2. So that's kind of why that. And the other general rule you could say that covers all this stuff is these are all games that I played. Rocket League, Doom, Frog Fractions 1 and 2, Spelunky, and The Witness are all games that I absolutely love, which is why we're now doing one on Final Fantasy, which is a genre I've a game series I have 0 experience with. And
Final Fantasy leads me to my next question. You're setting me up, man. You're putting the ball in the tee. It's great, because in these first 6-7 months of NoClip, you've only left the California area three times. One for the profile on John, which apparently was your vacation.
Right.
And then you went to Texas for id. And then now you've gone to Japan for Final Fantasy, which you actually tweeted out yesterday from when we were recording this, that one is going up in early June.
Yes.
So where do you want to travel next? Like, do you just want to keep going all over the world for this?
Yeah, totally. I definitely do. And I think the thing about this is that, like, I am thinking about NoClip as something that hopefully I'll work on for the next, 10 years. So you kind of have to take baby steps with a company that we have sort of like a very little margin for error. If we put up something that sucks, then was something we worked on for a month that sucks, and then the next project doesn't come for another month. So that means we have 2 months of sucking. So with everything we do, every production that we take on, it's very incremental. So doing the first one in California was important because it's like, okay, it won't cost us as much because I have to fly, a crew and day rates and flights and accommodation and all that sort of stuff. It all piles up, right?
Yeah.
So that's not so bad, right? Sure, we can go down to SoCal and do that. Texas a little bit further, right? Okay. And also, like, you have to imagine at this time, like, we launched with an incredible, like, the top amount I had as a goal was 15,000, and we ended up getting over 3,000 patrons to fund us to 19,000. But you also never know if that's going to half the next month, right? Especially at the start, because this is a super crazy, weird, emergent business model. So it was all about baby steps. So Texas was like, okay, we'll do that. We'll go there a little bit longer. We also did a longer shoot there. Rocket League was all done in one day. Id Software was done over 2. So, okay, we'll do a little bit longer. We'll figure that out. I did the Romero one on my own dime, basically, because I was going home for you can't write off vacations on tax. So that was just like, oh, I'll do something cool while I'm there.
Mm-hmm.
And then with Rediscovering Mystery, we thought, okay, well, all this stuff is kind of in our area. So what we're going to do is hire a bunch of spaces to shoot interviews in, because we hadn't done that yet. So that's what we did for John's interview, for both of Derek's interviews. And we also worked with the Museum of Art and Digital Entertainment here in Oakland, the video game museum, to set up a space in their place as well. So that kind of was another aspect of production that we were sort of getting used to and all that sort of stuff. So Japan then was, okay, we've got funding, we can go internationally, let's see if we can go somewhere for a week, do 3 days of interviews, set 2 whole days full of B-roll, and then come back with a massive production. And it's worked out really well. So looking to the future, I think the Japan trip has shown that we can do that sort of stuff. The proof is in the pudding. So next month when the videos go out, hopefully we'll have a better idea. But the idea now is that, like, okay, we can pitch this to international studios more. We have a bunch of people in Europe who want to work with us. I also want to go to Latin America and South America and do stories there as well. And not only having something to pitch to them, and actually, to be honest, pitching hasn't been a problem. We've had people, we have people knocking our door down for projects. I wish I had 3 more teams because we'd have 3 times more docs done. But at least having some sort of experience with it, personally, and for Jeremy, makes a massive difference. So that's kind of, it'll continue the same way, in that a lot of the next project we work on has to be based on our expectation of our viewers, but also in terms of production, in terms of funding, we're going to be a little bit more daring now that we've got the sort of, the war chest is healthy now, so we can really dip into it and spend a bunch of money. Because that Japan trip, man, holy shit! I used to make sure we were budgeting stuff real cheap at GameSpot, so nobody gave out to me and asked me to stop doing these things. But I have never spent so much money on a production as the Japan trip. Staying for a week in Tokyo is no joke. But we're very fortunate to be funded well by our patrons, so it wasn't too much of a shock.
And I had one question specifically about Japan, and I guess it ties into other stuff too. How does the translation work?
Yeah, that's part of the. Sorry, go ahead.
Do you hire a translator? Like, how does it work?
That's part of one of, like, the production challenges that you get whenever Like, this is the reason why he did this one, right? Is because that's an exciting question for somebody who produces stuff, right? You get it, right? Like, having challenges like that are exciting because it makes you like learn something new. So the way this one shook out was that I had budgeted bringing over an interpreter. A lot of companies like to use their own interpreters, which is obviously good because it saves you money, but it's also problematic because it means there's a buffer between you and the person you're interviewing. So what we ended up coming to a sort of an agreement with Square Enix was that they would not use their in-house interpreter in Japan, but we would take the US translator, who was somebody who I had confidence in, to Japan with us, and they would translate everything on the fly, and then once we got back here, I would have everything verified. So essentially what I have is I'm very confident in what we got because a lot of this stuff can't be quantified, but I respect the individual who we use to translate, and we've got a pretty good trust, so I'm pretty happy with it. But also on this end, once the final edit is done, because otherwise I'll have to hire somebody to translate 10 hours worth of footage. Once the final parts are done, I'm going to have that checked over by somebody here in the Bay Area. And then we have to figure out a way of not only sticking subtitles on them, but also having it so it works with the rest of our closed captioning. Because we have a policy that any of the long form docs that we do, we hire a company to do closed captioning on it so that folks with any sort of hearing issues can also consume them, and also so that folks who don't speak English, hopefully there are people out there who translate them. So we've had lots of our documentaries translated into everything from Russian, Chinese to Spanish, Portuguese. So that's the sort of next challenge is we're not going to bake the subtitles in. We're going to actually use YouTube's built-in CC system to do it, which is interesting because it means that you end up translating everything and not just the Japanese, which some people might not like. So I'm still trying to figure that one out a little bit.
That's gonna be interesting to see how it pans out, and it'll help you in future projects where you may need translation.
Right.
I'd be curious how to see how this all shakes out in the end of June.
Me too.
Right now, NoClip is, you mentioned earlier, it's just 2 people. There might be a third. Some of your posts on the website say Dennis Walsh, and I don't know who that is. I couldn't figure out who that was. So I'm going to say 2.
Yeah.
You and Jeremy. Do you ever see NoClip expanding, like a bigger team? You kind of mentioned if I had 3 more teams, I could do 3 more docs. Or do you ever see NoClip expanding?
I do. I think again, it's part of that mentality of you got to walk before you can run.
Yeah.
Old saying, you got to run before you can walk. Where like hopefully we've got a long enough lifeline in front of us that we can take these incremental steps to making ourselves better. There's nothing more I live and work in the Bay Area. I live in the more sort of real East Bay side of the Bay Area, so I'm sort of adjacent to the bubble. But the one thing that really irritates me, and this comes to somebody who's like I like the idea of entrepreneurship, and I've always been fascinated by people who start up their own companies, but the idea that like you've got companies that go from being these small like little independent things to suddenly having billions of dollars of money, like it ruins them. Like expanding that fast makes the thing that was cool not cool anymore. Mm-hmm. And the worst thing we could do is suddenly start to like expand what NoClip is right now before we even have some sort of identity. I think it's way more interesting artistically to grow in a more natural way. Mm. So what I would like for sure is in a couple of years to hire, a team of people to help produce, not only so I'm not, because I edit everything that goes up, but not only to sort of offset some of that stuff, but to tell different stories and to broaden, I guess, the problem with NoClip right now is that it's all filtered through me. So there's like this, we talked about how I covered games that I really like, and then Final Fantasy was also an issue because I covered a game that I'd never played before. So I had to play Final Fantasy 14 online for like number of weeks before we even went to Japan, so I had an idea of it. But like all of that stuff, it just means that there's a bias towards things that I like. So I would really love to use NoClip to, hire other people as well who have different ideas about how these things should be shot and have different ideas about what games we should be covering, and let them sort of find their own voice and use their vision as well. So ultimately, that's what I'd like. In terms of like the business model, people always ask like this stuff should go on Netflix or we should try and do a box set. The way that we're able to do this, the way we are, and with the money, with the amount of funding we have, is very much impinged on the idea that these are only going up on YouTube.
Yeah.
And that they're not really theatrical releases. I read a bunch of books in the year prior to launching about like the legal issues within filmmaking and copyright and on all this sort of stuff. And what I came away from it thinking was, like actually working on YouTube is like the holy grail, because you don't need to worry about any of this sort of stuff. It's just that the advertising market I fucking can't stand. So that's why Patreon really worked with us, because it basically allowed me to have my cake and eat it. So in my head, all this stuff is always going to be free for everyone. I don't care if people download them. I don't care if they torrent them. They can do whatever they want. Legally, that I can't do anything like that. I've only got licenses to put this stuff up on YouTube. And so I would say people shouldn't do that sort of stuff, but the more people get access to this stuff, the better. And that's why I like YouTube, because it's no platform that people can, add subtitles and watch it whenever they want and watch, without advertising. We don't put any ads on any of the videos. But what I would also like to do with NoClip in the future is perhaps expand that outwards to maybe do something that, is a bit more traditional documentary stuff, either for theatrical release or for digital release. I think it'd be really cool to put some of this stuff up on Steam and maybe like start working on cool docs for games that are available right now or in the past. And I think there's a load of different ways we can expand what we do in terms of our artistic direction that way. But I think that stuff is it's in the years away. I've got some ideas. We're turning one in September 12th of this year, and we'll be announcing some stuff then, which will hopefully point in that direction. But right now, I'm super happy with what we're doing, and it's a massive like humbling learning experience for me. So the worst thing I think I can do is bite off more than we can chew. So I'm just gonna keep biting little bits every project.
Just tiny little bits off your plate.
Exactly.
So the last question I had specifically about NoClip, and I have one more little section of questions I had, but just about NoClip, what's the future projects look like for NoClip? We know Final Fantasy 14 is early June.
Yes.
And then you just teased something yesterday, which the letters I guessed that I could figure out. Or for those that may not know, he put out a logo. It was NoClip with some fancy text after it, but he clipped letters away and made it unreadable. My guesses were SEWPS, but I don't know what that would spell.
Okay, the first two and the last one are right.
All right. So I should have told you this before the show. This is going up in the first week of June.
Cool.
So if you wanted,
sure. Yeah,
what is the thing you teased? What's the thing you teased? I'm curious. I tried to figure it out. I wanted to be cool and impress you.
It's another sub-brand. The problem we have is that we work on these big projects, and especially one like the Tokyo one it's a huge undertaking to make this much video in this short period of time. It's funny. Like sometimes I think it takes us long to make stuff, and then I remember that like there are lots of other crowdfunded indie documentary things which have taken a lot longer than the things that we work on. Like in 6 months, we've actually put out quite a decent amount of video.
I think you have a pretty good turnaround.
Thanks. It's good to know. Some of our like folks who are really into what we do would love to have more. But then there's people who are like patrons who are like, oh, I finally got around to watching Rocket League last week.
Oh wow. Okay.
Because they're really long videos. But to sort of like, I mean, to not impact negatively the work that we try and do on the big docs, and not try and skip time on those, while also trying to like get out more content for the folks who want to watch more stuff. we've basically created this sub-brand called NoClip Sessions. And it's Sessions.
I thought that might be ends, but they seem so close together in the font. I was like, it has to be a W.
It's a weird font. It's one of those fonts that's actually hard to read once it's full as well. So
okay.
you have to be very delicate with it. And essentially what these are is they're like kind of shorter, off-brand, off-topic chats with developers about, you know, sometimes about their games, but also about other aspects of game development, and not just development, actually, other people. So we at GDC last month we shot 10 interviews. This
is where those videos went.
Exactly. So we did, you know, we interviewed Harvey Smith about his time working on, you know, everything from Dishonored to Deus Ex and his life in France. We talked to Zoe Quinn about her favorite, you know, old FMV games. We talked to Teresa Derringer about developing VR games that you can use on a plane. Like all of these sort of smaller, stranger conversations that wouldn't, you know, we couldn't fit them into a bigger thing. Or like maybe we have a big developer, we only have them for an hour, so we want to make something cool out of it, but we don't have it. We don't have them long enough to make like a full doc about Deus Ex or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a way of like sort of having our cake and eating it. So we're basically going to be putting those out in between big projects. So by the time this is up, we'll have a bunch of them up already for people to watch. Yeah, and they're fun. They're like way more laid back and chatty and one-on-one. And we actually have Marty and Hugo from id Software back in to review our documentary.
I remember seeing a picture. You had the two of them at a table, and they were like, "We're back" or something.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
it was, fun.
What's your dream game then to do a documentary on for NoClip?
Wow. I have so many, and some of them we may be in active talks with.
Okay.
We've actually, I'm not sure how this will have shaken out by June, but we did have a project scheduled for right after Final Fantasy, which has very recently been scuppered. So we're going to have to figure that one out. Maybe we'll end up piecing it back together in time. I'm not really sure. It's kind of out of our control. But if we don't, we've got other stuff planned for later in the year, which is going to be as big and even bigger, actually. I mean, I think right now there's a couple. Going to Japan was really cool. I'd love to do something. I'd love to do a profile of Hideo Kojima. I think that would be a very fun. I think it's difficult to talk about Death Stranding and what they're doing because, from what I've heard, Konami are keeping a very particular eye on that studio.
I would also think, like, Death Stranding, I'm worried, is going to be a little bit like No Man's Sky, where the fan hype is a little out of control for that game.
Yo, man, it's got Guillermo del Toro in it.
But he's not actually a part of it. They just scanned his body.
It's really weird. Yeah, and also, like, I don't want to do a straight preview, and also, you know, they've got bigger fish to do that. Like, they'll get Game Informer or IGN or someone to do that thing. They're not going to give it to guy who turns up and edits videos that come out 2 months later. But that'll be a fun one. You know, we're laying the groundwork with the Final Fantasy one for us going to Japan as well. Like, we're definitely going to go back and do other stuff. If I had I really liked the videos that Nintendo put out for Breath of the Wild that were, you know, little dives, you know, chats with the developers about how they made it. I would love to do more of those. If we could do one on Zelda, I would absolutely adore that. In terms of other games I played recently, Horizon Zero Dawn, I want to figure out what the hell I like Killzone, but how the Killzone people made that game I want to know what the fuck happened over at Guerrilla over the past couple of years.
It's certainly, I haven't played Horizon yet. I skipped on that for the Switch and Zelda, and I'm just waiting for my birthday to get Horizon. But
nice.
That game, people can't stop talking about it, and it's
really good.
It looks mighty good. There's something about robot dinosaurs.
It's I feel like I'm really fortunate that I got to play it before the hype train really took off. So taper your views a little bit, because it's not like the second coming.
Okay.
But if you go in thinking, oh, this is just going to be another open world game, then it ends up, it's so interesting. Like, I can't believe how in so many ways it's such a successful game. And then in terms of other stuff, I mean, Deus Ex has been one I've been chasing for months now. It comes up in the Harvey Smith thing about why it's difficult to do retrospective on games that came out so long ago. That's a challenge that I've definitely run into. I wanted to do one on Quake. We did sort of do one on Quake 3 when we were at id, which we still haven't put out yet, and it's been hard trying to find a place to put it out. But that will eventually come out in the next couple of months. And then outside of that, like, I'd love to do Fallout. I'd love to do one on the Elder Scrolls. You know,
so Bethesda games.
Yeah, I know. We have a relationship with them already.
I
think they thought that Doom one was cool.
Prey would be interesting, just because I heard, Prey 2 became what Prey is today. I don't know how the game is.
That would be cool. We did actually interview the two leads of the new Prey at GDC, so that we do have something on that in our sessions features. To talk to the folks at Human Head about what happened with that one. It's a totally different studio, but it would be interesting to know, how far along that was before it got canned. It's one of the problems you run into quite a lot is there are companies that own IPs, and then there are studios that develop the game. So we're gonna, that's a problem that you have right now with Hitman is what's going on there now, that it looks like Square have separated from IO.
Yeah, that broke this morning, the day we're recording this, which was crazy because that game was excellent and I think surprising in a lot of ways.
It's the best Hitman game. I'm a huge fan of that series, and I think that is the best game IO ever made and the best Hitman game. And to see that it sold a quarter or less of what Absolution did is fucking tragic. But I don't know. I will have to see how that shakes out. It only, like you said, only broke a couple of hours ago. So we'll have to wait.
Hot news a month old by the time you're listening to this.
Probably, right? God damn it. One thing I like to ask people who are interested in what we're doing is what you'd like.
Okay.
Because I think that's more of an interesting question for me. Because that's how the Final Fantasy one came out.
Yeah.
Is that we had a bunch of patrons telling us, yo, you should look into this game. And I had no idea about what that story was, and it ended up being pretty incredible. What would you like?
I think on the spot, darn it.
I know it's like the choice paradox.
Yeah, it's like a Telltale game, Do I make the right decision? For all I know, maybe it becomes the next thing.
3 more seconds left, or he's going to say nothing.
No, yeah, my games I adore is Hotline Miami. I don't know how much of a story there is there, but that game, I lost my save. I was going after the platinum, and I lost my save, and I started over months later and still did it. Like, I love that game, and then the sequel I thought was very good too. Like that, I think that's pretty interesting as far as just a game goes. But story-wise, I would love to know Uncharted 4 and that whole shift with Amy leaving.
Yeah,
I think that would be cool. Another one that's The Last Guardian. I've never played their games before, but the story behind that game just has to be incredibly interesting, I think.
Yeah, there's 3 good ideas. I'd love to.
Well,
I really
go.
love. I mean, hey, look, Naughty Dog are in California. That's not so far. That might be cool. And The Last Guardian one is. It's almost, now that the game's come out, there's some of the air of mystery around that is kind of gone now.
Because it exists.
Oh, that's what a unicorn looks like. Yeah. Hotline Miami is. I reviewed both those games for GameSpot, and I adore them both. I actually prefer the second one.
Really?
I think I'm in a small company with that one. I think it's
I think they both have their strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
It's the second one. I do think the bigger areas can wear down on you a little bit, but I think it adds a little bit more of the randomness to it and gives it a bigger kick when you complete a room.
So I think. Yeah, they're almost like when you get into the nitty gritty, they are kind of like 2 different games fundamentally. Because especially with the whole there's less choice, so you're not just picking Tiger Mask every single time. But they're forcing you to use all these weird characters, so you kind of have to adapt your play style a bunch. That's what I kind of liked about it. Also, I have that soundtrack on vinyl.
I got a record player for Christmas last year, and I've been slowly building my collection, and I need that Hotline Miami vinyl in my life. And it's
so what do you have so far?
I have Uncharted 4. I got the Uncharted.
That's a good one.
It was I really want the Persona 5 one, but they always announce these vinyls right when I have no money, and it's never fair. I have that.
And they are very expensive.
Oh, they're so expensive. I have Shovel Knight.
Oh, cool. Was that IM 8-bit as well? The Uncharted one was, right?
The Uncharted was IM 8-bit. Shovel Knight was Brave Wave music.
Oh, cool.
Those are the two games I have. I have Discovery and Random Access Memories by Daft Punk.
Nice.
And I have Hamilton the musical.
Oh, great. I saw that for the first time last week.
You saw it?
Yeah.
You're one of the
It came
people?
to San Francisco. I know. I was very lucky. It was a honeymoon present, or a honeymoon present, a wedding present from a relative.
I hope a relative gives me a Hamilton tickets for my wedding.
That's exactly right. Put the feelers out now.
Oh, and I have La La Land as well.
Oh, cool.
Which
I love that movie.
The record is like this transparent blue, so you can hold it up to the light and see through it and stuff. It's pretty. I didn't know that was going to be a thing until I opened it.
It's great.
I love vinyls. I wish I could get the Last of Us one that came out like 2 years ago. It's hard. I want Castlevania Symphony of the Night. I know Mondo is making those games slowly but surely. So
right. If I come across a Last of Us one in my travels, I will send it to you. I'll keep an eye out.
I'll hold you to that. That would be amazing.
That's a deal.
It's that and Uncharted 4 are some of my favorite games. I have a struggle every day with those games. Which one's better?
Well, there's a Last of Us poster right behind you, so I figured as much.
Yeah, my friend got that. It's like Best Buy promotional stuff. It's pretty.
Oh, that's
so
great.
It's one of those really
GameStop.
nice, sturdy ones.
Yeah, it's perfect. You got a cardboard cutout of Nathan Drake somewhere in there as well.
No, I do have the statue from Uncharted 4 off to the side.
Oh, that's cool.
Here, no one else can see it, but you can. Here you go.
Oh my god, that is dope.
It's pretty sweet. I'll tell you this off air. I have a crazy Uncharted 4 story, but we'll save that for later.
No worries.
If you don't mind, I had one more kind of section I wanted to ask you about.
No problem. I apologies. I give very rambly answers, so I apologize.
No, this is why I do it, because I think it's so interesting what people have to say. But I just, as you know, because we were emailing about it and scheduling and stuff, I just graduated from college.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And one of the last classes I took was called Multimedia Journalism, and basically there were two projects over the course of the semester where we got to make short mini. One was like a day in a life, and another was a documentary. Basically, we got to make a tiny 5-minute documentary about a guy.
Cool.
So we learned techniques and rules and stuff to follow. So I guess that's still in my brain. So when I was watching your work, I'm like comparing it to the rules that I was taught and techniques and things like that, and I look and all sorts of stuff. And so I wanted to ask you just kind of some questions about the process of making a documentary, if you don't mind.
Sure. No worries.
The first one was just organizing and tackling a project, because you have way more footage than I ever got to use in my class.
Right.
And just how do you tackle, 10 hours of footage? How do you do that?
Incrementally?
Yeah.
It's, I mean, I think it helps when you know, I think it helps when you were there the first time.
Okay.
People who are editors of other people's work, I think they're magicians. Especially film editors. I don't really know how they're able to log stuff mentally, because you can log everything and you can write notes and you can have references and time codes, but unless you see everything, trying to find the pace of something is or the story in something is really hard. So I think once you were there, you have an idea what your story is, and then your ears pick up when things are said that that's going to go in, right? So outside of just the sort of technical aspect of having everything set up properly and having your file system be good and naming files properly, and having a good system with your colorists so that they can send the footage over later that's got the color grade and it doesn't fuck everything up. Outside of that stuff, just having some sort of mental map, like a model, having an internal model in your head of what the thing is going to end up looking like, can save you a lot of time. There's this thing about trying to. I was reading something earlier today about how artists, when they're drawing stuff, hate their drawings because the picture that they have two versions of the picture. They have the one that's in their head and they have the one that ends up being on the paper, and then always the one in your head ends up being better than the one that's on the paper, right? Because just the transitive property of doing that thing, right? So you have to keep remembering is that nobody can see the one that's in your head. So it's really good to like use your own model as like a guideline for how good the thing can be, but it can also at a certain stage kind of wear you out. And I think that's where, in terms of like these big projects, if you're working on them, I kind of adopt a good like maybe not 80-20, maybe like 90-10 rule, where at a certain stage I've done enough and I'm not going to like tune this one part to perfection anymore. I need to move on to the next section. So with big projects, I think that's what you're constantly fighting, is that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, and you really need to like just make sure that you're like gobbling enough of the project up on a week by week basis. So it's so you don't end up, the last week basically doing hours and hours and hours worth of work. So I think having a mental model of that is very, very important. And then, there are other like less, interesting, more technical ways of fixing those problems. But honestly, I think projects or software like Premiere has actually sort of eradicated most of those, especially now we don't work with tapes anymore. God, those were dark days.
Could you, I can't imagine it because I didn't use them, but that sounds so crazy just to like have tape. Oh, that sounds crazy.
I never edited with tapes. That's I'm lucky for that.
All right, that I do remember my dad's like camcorder as a kid, and there was these mini tapes and stuff. So that I do remember shooting videos and stuff with that as a kid. So that was pretty cool. Another one that actually didn't dawn on me until I watched your Witness documentary, which just happened to be the last one that I needed to watch. How do you go about collecting the B-roll of games, specifically super old games that may have never come out, like in Doom, and I think in The Witness, his game about magic spells and lines, I forget the name of it, but how do you go about getting that kind of footage?
It's a mixture of two things, I guess. One of which is the sort of the pure version that I try to do in all of our docs, and then the second one, which is actually kind of like the dirty secret, which I hate. The first way is that like we have enough lead time on this stuff where I can get access to most of the stuff if I can, right? So I have a machine set up here with a relatively like messy capture system where I have a FrameMeister, which is essentially an analog input which outputs in HDMI and can take it's like a deinterlacing box, or not it's like a kind of, you can plug basically any retro console.
It's like it's the RGB gaming and stuff, how you get your NES and stuff on HD TVs. It's like the purest way to preserve and play them.
Especially if you have an RGB modded, N64 or something like that. So over the past couple of months, I've been collecting a lot of old consoles. I never really did it before because I moved country so often that having like a lot of equipment was never something I could afford to do. So now I've sort of expanded that library. So it's a mixture of recording stuff off of consoles using that, just shadow playing a bunch of PC footage, like all the Witness footage. Obviously, that's not particularly difficult. Just got to make sure you use a controller so it's not too jerky and people can watch it. And we try and pull the UI out a lot. Like in the Rocket League stuff in the Unreal Tournament footage, you might notice that it's like a lot of it's shot like almost like a movie. Like you trying to use console commands to get rid of the UI and then shoot stuff as if it's B-roll in the game, instead of just shooting gameplay. And it definitely has a different sort of communication with the viewer. And then ultimately, like sometimes we just can't get footage and you have to pull that shit from YouTube. And we credit people when we do it. Most of the time, sometimes we use clips that are so short, or we use them in montages that I can't just throw up a lower third, and honestly it makes me feel like a bit of a dirtbag. So we try and whenever I do that, I try and pick clips that are like quite old, like 7-8 years old on YouTube, that like nobody's going to care. I never do ones that like have commentary on them. It's usually just like, there used to be a thing years ago on YouTube when YouTube first went out that people just like put up long plays just for the sake of game preservation, so that there's a record of the game somewhere. So that's what I tend to use whenever I'm short of something. So for instance, Arx Fatalis was a game that was used in the Witness one. That's the spell casting game. We had significant problems trying to capture that on a modern Windows machine, and I have another virtual machine, but it also wasn't really working on that either. So I eventually just found a old long play of Arx Fatalis and used that instead. And you know, in a perfect world, I would love to be able to, you know, dedicate 8 hours to solving that problem to get that one piece of footage. But sometimes we're up against the clock. So it's not something. It's the one part of the production I wish that I didn't have to do. But the nature of the stuff that we're making is, you know, supposed to be spreading information about these games. You know, it's not a commercial. It is a commercial initiative because it's a company. But I'm hoping that, like, you know, yeah, I'm holier than thou and purer than thou when it comes to this sort of stuff. So I hope that people who record this footage would be happy in the way that we use it. But the lion's share of the footage that we use is stuff that has been recorded here in my studio.
That sounds pretty cool. I wish I had a setup, just a whole big. I try. It's pretty.
It's expensive, man. Like I know exactly how you feel.
Yes.
I'm very fortunate to be able to like piece the things together. But like you're right, like even like the FrameWise is no joke.
It's like $300 or something.
Yeah, I think it might be a little bit more actually.
Yeah.
And then like just every once in a while, something, you know, like a cable you need that costs like $30. It's like it's just too much, right? But we're lucky that I've got my business Amazon account. I just throw things on there and then we get it, and we know it makes me feel good because it makes me feel like, hey, we're spending the money that the folks have put in to make these projects better. Like every dime we spend is in you know, going towards trying to create a better product for people, and I hope people will see that.
And then the last kind of just structure doc making a doc. We had a lot of rules of how to shoot like A-roll, like the angle
right.
or whatever. Or one thing is, you know, don't talk when the other person is talking, which is something I try not to do, but sometimes I feel like I got to chime in. But when I watch your documentaries, if my professor was grading, he would knock you some points off for different things. But I think it's your style, and I particularly like your style. I like how you do chime in, and I can hear you in the background. I think that engages and makes it a little more grounded, down to earth kind of. But we've kind of talked about your whole journey from Citizen Game to now NoClip, but how do you approach your style compared to other documentaries you may have seen or you watch, or how do you come up with your style?
I'll say first of all that I am not very good at making. I'm going to say I'm not very good at making documentaries. I think I never went to school for this. I went to school for programming and multimedia development. I made websites and Flash games and stuff like that and graphics. So I'm 100% self-taught. I never went to film school. And I have like big old imposter syndrome when it comes to this sort of stuff. What I do know is the video games reporting world, because I consumed it like somebody who's a director who like was a massive fan of like, you know, Japanese, you know, slasher movies or like who like binged on that shit for years and years and years. That was me in video game coverage. And so if there was anything that I think, like, I think the stuff that we shoot is fine. It's good. It looks good. It's not groundbreaking. We're not like really doing anything totally different. What makes NoClip different is the way in which we talk to people and the way they talk to us. And that comes from the frustration that I had, that I said earlier, about how interviews went, especially with previews with developers, where it was almost like, you know, interviewing politicians, or, you know, you had writers that were suddenly being asked to do video on video game websites, and they were asking questions as if they were interviewing a sports personality or a politician or something, where they have a list of questions and they want the answers. And when you're writing that stuff down in an article, that's perfectly fine. That's the way it goes. But when you're doing on a video, you basically completely eradicate the idea of rapport. And I think rapport is like crucially important when talking to people who don't usually talk on camera. So what I like to do, what I sort of learned, this is like not some grand master plan that I have. This is like such a needs must situation, which is when I used to work for GameSpot, when I would host the E3 stage, you would basically get people who were doing 4 or 5 interviews that day, right? So you'd have Cliff Bleszinski come on. He's been interviewed by all these people. He's tired. Now it's GameSpot, one of the big mainstream game sites. I'm going to sit here for 10 minutes and I'm going to ask me really obvious questions about Jazz Jackrabbit and fucking whatever, right? So Well, what I basically used to do was just research the hell out of every single person that I would interview because I wanted them to walk away from E3 thinking, oh, that one interview I did on the GameSpot stage, that guy knew what he was talking about. And we had like a good chat. So that sort of taught me, I guess, how to like strike up a rapport with somebody very quickly, because we have these very like 10-minute segments, and like let them know that this is like a cool space to like jam and hang out and have a fun conversation. So for me, it's really important that I'm engaged in the conversation with somebody. I'm not interviewing people like I'm asking them questions and they're responding. We're having a chat. And if I sometimes laugh because they've said something funny, or they say something, and as we would in a conversation, I'm going to like interject and say like, whoa, what do you mean by that? Like, those are all really natural, fun ways of like having a conversation about the topic, but also breaking them out of interview mode, like reminding them that this is just a chat. We're just talking. You don't have to worry about it. And with each interview we do, people have figured out that like, oh, that's the way this all goes down. And when we talk to Danny or we do a NoClip, it's not going to be this like super formal fucking thing. And also in the edit, it's not going to make me look like an asshole. So that's kind of like, I totally understand that you don't want to. You don't want the voice of the documentary in like film is like something that I'm still trying to get to grips with, especially somebody who, in the world of quote unquote personalities and games coverage is such a big thing, right? So removing myself from the frame. It's why I don't shoot myself. It's why I don't like film myself, right? I don't shoot myself for lots of reasons. I like my life. But the reason I don't like film myself, because it's not about me, but I need to at least have that vibe and laugh at them and smile and nod and keep eye contact so that they feel like they're able to open up. It's also why we ask a bunch of questions about people's childhood and the games they played right away, and we don't always use them in the edits, but we always talk about that stuff straight away just to let them know that this is like...
Ease them in.
Ease them in. Get out of your media-trained world. We're just talking about video games and we're going to have fun.
I like it. I'm taking notes. I don't know if my professor would approve, but I think
do what you do. Do what you need to do to pass your thing. And also, like,
well, it's all past and done. He can't do anything now.
We're done. Perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I think taking inspiration from, like I said, I'm learning more about making video now than I ever did before, because I feel like there's so much for me to learn, and I'm so green at this. I think everyone, we should all like take inspiration from as many different people as we can. And I've had such like a renaissance of like creativity the past 6 months, where I've watched more movies with like a critical eye, and I've like, read more, different types of media and stuff. And I feel like I'm learning more now than I did since I was in college, actually. So my hope is that in a year's time, I'll look back at all the stuff we've made this year and gone, oh God, what were you doing, you idiot?
It's interesting to hear you say you're green at this when you've been doing it for almost 7 years. According to my notes, May 16th was the first episode of Citizen Game. So,
jeez.
I mean,
but was I doing it then? Like, I was just like making 10-minute clips.
But you were doing videos and stuff. I mean, you did an interview. You did a little documentary, I would say, in there. So we can say 7 years. I don't know.
Yes. It feels like I've been making like these types of videos for like a year. Since the Overwatch one went up. That's when I feel like...
That's where you feel like it started?
Yeah. That's where I feel like it, like,
I can
the rubber hit the road.
Rubber hit the road would be good. You were just learning. You were building the car, as it were, up until that point.
Right, because, like, I didn't know this is what I wanted to do, right? Like, I wasn't, like, saying, like, oh, in 7 years I'll be making long-form videos that people will fund for absolutely no reason except for the idea that they want to watch. Like, this wasn't some grand master plan. It was just taking an opportunity, and I guess, believe me, if I had spent 7 years actually trying to get good at this, I'd be a lot better at it. I'd hope, anyway. Who knows? Maybe I wouldn't.
Maybe it'll be the same, but it's pretty cool. And so the last question that I try to ask everyone on the show is for a piece of advice for someone who may be listening, whether that's someone who wants to get into games media, wants to make a documentary in your case, or anything. Just a piece of advice you'd want to share with any potential listeners.
It's really weird, right? Because I get asked a lot about like breaking into the industry, and I put up some videos on my YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/Daniel Dwyer or whatever, my
Yep.
personal one, not NoClip. Just to sort of try and answer that broad question. It's weird to be in this situation because I feel like I was trying to break into the industry for so long um, that it's strange still to actually be on this side of that question. But I mean, in terms of any sort of advice broadly, I'd say like just enjoy what you're doing. If I would love if we lived in a world in which everyone could do what they did and be able to make a living from it and enjoy it. But the sad reality is that for a lot of people that won't be the case. So, and it wasn't like I thought that's what it was for me. Like I said, I'd thrown in the towel. I was moving to another country to become a web developer. Well, I was already just to do it somewhere else. So, like, but I enjoyed all the stuff I did at Citizen Game. Like, even if it didn't actually land me a job, I enjoyed doing it. I enjoyed, having those conversations and working with my friends and learning all those things. And it was a fun process. So the actual journey itself was what I really liked, and the destination, at that stage, it didn't seem like I was going to break in, and that was okay because I actually had fun doing it. And what I see a lot of people, or some people do, is they enjoy the idea of where it might land them, but they're not actually enjoying the moment to moment. And like life's too short. Like, I am in a very weird position where I have been held hostage by my ambition for like 10 years, which in my situation, I'm really, really, really lucky that this worked out. And this worked out in a way that is so much greater than I even imagined. And I feel very humbled and about that. But, it could have easily not. And then I would be the person who spent a decade of their life chasing a dream which didn't happen, right? So if I wasn't enjoying the moment to moment of that, then that would have been a tragedy, because there are so many things to enjoy in this life and so many ways to be fulfilled. And sometimes when we put our head down and we try and reach a goal, we forget about all the other things in our lives that give us joy and give us satisfaction. So I think that is really important to say to people, because it also means that if you're still doing it, if you still have that drive and passion, even if you have like this broader sort of sense of maybe, of using the time that you have in this life, then that means you're really enjoying it, even if it doesn't work out. So I think that's probably what I'd say to people, is that like, just enjoy what you're doing. Like, we have this thing sorry, this is a very rambling answer. We have this thing in modern society where unless what you're doing is something that you can do for a job, or unless what you're doing is something that like millions of people want to watch, it's not worthwhile. And that's complete and utter bullshit. Painting a painting that only you ever see, or on a weekend somewhere is more fulfilling than, to a lot of people, than putting up a reaction video about a movie trailer that 5 million people watch. Like, and we sort of forget that. And as creative beings, I feel like that's something that can really like haunt your soul. So yeah, I guess my weird piece of advice would be just enjoy what you're doing, and don't make the end the reason why you're doing it. Like, make the journey the reason why you're doing it, regardless of where you end up in the end.
I like it. That's a pretty darn good piece of advice. I feel like I'm following it a little bit, because I genuinely enjoy doing this kind of a show and other projects I do and stuff. So I like it. Good piece of advice.
That's super important, and you can tell as well in the enthusiasm you have. It's like that's something that people warm to. So keep enjoying it.
Well, if I didn't enjoy it, I don't think I would have watched all your documentaries. Which
fair enough. They are long. I'm so sorry.
No, they're not. I don't think they're long. Like my fiance hates it when I send her like a 10-minute YouTube video. Like, I'll send her a Casey Neistat vlog or something, and she'll just like roll her eyes. I'm like, this is long to you? I watch like 30-minute YouTube videos all the time. But so I think that's a wrap. Thank you, Danny, for your time today and doing this show with us.
Thank you so much for having me on, man. It was an absolute pleasure to spend a Thursday morning chatting with you.
It was. Thank you. For those of you that are listening, this is Behind the Pixel, which is a part of Model Citizens Media. You can check everything out over on the site over there. We do a gaming podcast, Millennial Gaming Speak. We've got our regular the show, which is the Model Citizen Show, and there's a music podcast some of our guys over there do called Reeling in the Years. So you can check out all of those over at modelcitizensmedia.com. You can follow the network over at ModelPods on Twitter. You can follow myself on Twitter at Max the White. You can follow Danny on Twitter at Danny O'Dwyer and NoClip at NoClip Video.
Perfect.
You want to plug NoClip here for a little bit at the end?
Sure. I mean, type it into Google. It's almost the first thing that comes up now, which is pretty rad. Yeah, we're on YouTube. NoClip Video is the channel. And yeah, we got a bunch of documentaries up there if you want to watch on a bunch of different games, and they're free to watch, and there's no advertising, and all paid for by wonderful patrons over at patreon.com/Danny O'Dwyer. But
if you like him, you should check out his Patreon page.
yeah, if you want extras, they're all there. But all the documentary stuff is free for everyone. That's really important to us. All the Patreon only stuff is like production things and travel logs and
yeah.
and
You just put up. I haven't seen it because I'm not a patron yet.
No worries.
But
you don't have to be. That's the beauty. It's the beauty. Support comes in many forms.
It's pretty cool. It's like I see Patreon as like a subscription, kind of like Netflix. Like if I want the content, it's pretty cool. But you just put up like an hour-long behind the scenes of Japan, right, for patrons?
Yeah. Our patrons were asking for, there was a bunch of things. We were like, what do you guys want more of? Because there's only two of us, so it's hard for us to dedicate a lot of time to anything. And they were like, more behind the scenes. So when we were in Japan, we basically just shot like a travel log, I guess, Mm-hmm. Rough and dirty, but it was sort of the experience of us being in Tokyo for the first time. The first time Jeremy was outside of North America as well, so it was a real trip for him. It was a real trip for both of us, actually.
That would be crazy. First time out of the country and you're in Japan. Japan's a dream.
It's like a different planet. And the weirdest part was we did a meetup with our patrons in Tokyo, and like 30 people turned up. It's just really weird.
It's cool to see how kind of global your whole project, your whole company is.
Although I will say most of them were like either tourists from North America or they were expats who were living in Tokyo.
That's our secret. No one has to know. Well, thank you again, Danny. It was a real honor to have you on the show.
Honor was mine.
Thank you, guys, and we'll see you next time.